Have you ever looked at your child sleeping peacefully, completely innocent, and felt a sudden, chilling dread creep over you? That profound, primal fear that something unseen, something malicious, might be lurking just beyond the periphery of your perfect, safe world. This is the kind of story that makes you check your locks twice before going to bed. So before the story truly begins, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're listening from your city and checking the local time, let me know in the comments below. And if you've had a similar creepy encounter, share it below. Maybe your story will inspire the next one. Now, dim the lights, feel the air grow colder, and try to ignore the shadows dancing at the corner of your eye. Let's dive together into tonight's nightmare. It all started so innocently, as these things always do, don't they? My daughter, Lily, was 5 years old, a whirlwind of bright curls and endless energy. She was the kind of child who saw magic in ordinary things. Puddles were lakes for tiny boats, fallen leaves were crunchy gold, and every cloud held a secret kingdom. So when she first mentioned her new invisible friend, my initial reaction was a smile and a quiet sense of nostalgia for my own childhood imagination. Most kids have them, right? A silent companion, a confidant for their secret worlds. Lily named her friend Tilly. Tilly, she explained, had very soft hands and liked to watch her draw. She was always there, just out of sight, a gentle presence in Lily's vibrant world. At first, Tilly was just Tilly. Lily would set an extra plate at the table, narrate conversations with an empty chair, or ask for Tilly's juice at snack time. It was endearing, a testament to her creative spirit. I'd play along, asking, "What did Tilly say today, sweetie?" Or "Did Tilly like the story?" And Lily would always respond with wide-eyed conviction, recounting Tilly's thoughts on everything from the color of the sky to the taste of her favorite cookies. I remember one Tuesday afternoon, I'd come home from my part-time job as a freelance graphic designer, and Lily was in her room, meticulously arranging a pile of stuffed animals in a semicircle around a single, empty spot on the rug. She looked up, her face bright. "Tilly says Fluffy needs to sit closer to Mr. Bear, Mom, because he's shy." It was perfectly normal, even sweet. I chalked it up to precocious imagination, a sign of a blossoming mind. What parent wouldn't? The first ripple of unease, a tiny crack in the veneer of normalcy, came during dinner one evening. We were eating spaghetti, a family favorite, and Lily was recounting her day. "Tilly says you put too much salt in the sauce, Mommy," she said, her fork clutched in a small fist, eyes darting to the empty chair beside her. I paused, my own fork halfway to my mouth. I had put too much salt in the sauce, a tiny slip of the wrist while rushing earlier that day. My husband, Mark, who usually tuned out Lily's Tilly stories with an amused smile, looked at me, a question in his eyes. I just shrugged, forcing a laugh. "Oh, does she now? Well, Tilly can be a picky eater," but a small seed of discomfort had been planted. It was such a small detail, easily dismissed. Maybe Lily had heard me mutter about it, or tasted it, and had just attributed her thought to Tilly. That was it, just a child's vivid imagination, borrowing my own internal monologue. But then the incidents became less easy to explain away. A few days later, I was clearing out a cluttered drawer in the kitchen. It was full of old pens, spare batteries, and a small, tarnished silver locket I hadn't seen in years. It had belonged to my grandmother, a simple, heart-shaped piece that only opened with a specific fiddly twist. I'd never worn it, never shown it to Lily. That evening, as I tucked her into bed, she gave me a tight hug. "Tilly says you found Granny's special heart today," she whispered, her eyes wide and innocent. My breath hitched. I hadn't mentioned finding it to anyone, not even Mark. It had been buried under old receipts, completely forgotten until that afternoon. "Did you see me find it, sweetie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, but a tremor was already there. Lily shook her head, burrowing deeper into her pillow. "No, Tilly just knows things." The phrase, "Tilly just knows things," echoed in my mind, growing louder, more sinister with each passing day. It started to feel less like a childhood quirk and more like a subtle invasion. The invisible friend was no longer simply a product of Lily's playful mind. It was becoming an information conduit, a whisperer of secrets. I began to watch Lily more closely, to listen intently to her half-chatter with the unseen. She'd spend hours in her room, sometimes giggling, sometimes just quietly conversing. I'd stand outside her closed door, heart pounding, trying to decipher the murmurs. Was she talking to herself, or was there really something else in there with her? This was new. Before, Tilly was always present, but never consuming. The sheer amount of time Lily spent with her invisible friend started to bother me. One afternoon, Mark and I had a small disagreement about money, a common stressor in our lives, but one we always tried to keep from Lily. It was a hushed conversation in the kitchen, barely above a whisper, about a forgotten bill and the dwindling savings account. The next morning, Lily came to me, her brow furrowed. "Tilly says you're sad about the numbers, Mommy," she said, pulling at my sleeve. "She says not to worry, because the big yellow envelope will come soon to make it better." The big yellow envelope was a specific, anticipated payment I was waiting for from a client, one I had only discussed with Mark, and even then, in vague terms. Mark always paid the bills, but I managed our freelance income. The hairs on my arms stood on end. My attempt to laugh it off felt strained, even to my own ears. "Oh, Tilly is so silly, sweetie. Don't worry about grown-up things." But a frantic feeling was churning in my stomach. How could she know? Lily was never in the kitchen when we had that conversation. She was playing in her room, a floor above us. I started to feel a growing sense of paranoia, a subtle shift in the air when Tilly was mentioned. I'd find myself looking over my shoulder, checking the corners of rooms, wondering if there was an unseen pair of eyes watching us. It was irrational, I told myself. A child's imagination was powerful, and children were perceptive. Maybe I'd unconsciously telegraphed my stress, and Lily, in her innocence, had attributed it to her imaginary companion. My attempts to rationalize it, however, were starting to wear thin. The thought that something was always present, always listening, began to haunt my waking hours. It was like living in a house with an invisible, omnipresent listener. The final straw for my sanity in this initial phase came during her regular checkup with Dr. Evans, our longtime pediatrician. Dr. Evans, a kind, elderly woman, asked Lily if she had any special friends. Lily, beaming, immediately launched into a detailed description of Tilly. Dr. Evans, ever patient, nodded along. "And what does Tilly like to do?" she asked. Lily thought for a moment, then looked at me. "Tilly says Mommy had a very bad scraped knee when she was 7, she announced, her voice clear. "And that her knee still has a little bumpy scar right here." Lily pointed to the exact spot on my left knee, where a small, barely visible scar remained from a childhood bicycle accident. A scar I hadn't thought about in decades, a story I had never told her, or anyone for that matter. My face must have gone pale. Dr. Evans, noticing my sudden shift, gave me a concerned look. "Is everything all right, Sarah?" she asked softly. I could only manage a weak, "Yes, fine, just a memory." But it wasn't fine, not at all. The playful innocence of an invisible friend had curdled into something far more disturbing. Something in my home, or perhaps someone, was scrutinizing every detail of our lives, pulling secrets from the deepest recesses of my past and whispering them into the ear of my young daughter. The realization that this invisible friend wasn't just imaginary, that it genuinely knows things it shouldn't, filled me with a cold, creeping dread that I couldn't shake. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the nightmare had only just begun. The incident at the pediatrician's office shattered what little remained of my composure. The scrape on my knee, that intimate, forgotten detail from my childhood, had been a secret only I held. Now it was out, spoken by my own daughter, attributed to her invisible friend. The rational part of my brain, the part that clung desperately to logic, began to fray. I started seeing Tilly not as a whimsical figment of Lily's imagination, but as an actual, malevolent presence, an ethereal stalker in our home. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, Every sudden silence became a sign that Tilly was moving, listening, watching. I felt a constant prickling sensation on the back of my neck, as if I were perpetually under surveillance. This creeping paranoia became my constant companion, an unwelcome shadow to my every thought. I tried to talk to Mark about it, cautiously at first. Don't you think it's a little strange how specific Tilly's information is getting? I asked him one night after Lily was asleep. He was scrolling through his phone, distracted. Kids say weird things, honey. It's probably just a phase. She's got a vivid imagination. He patted my hand, oblivious to the icy grip of fear that already had me in its clutches. He was a rational man, grounded in the tangible, and the idea of an invisible entity whispering secrets to our daughter was simply beyond his comprehension. To him, it was just another one of my overthinking episodes. This dismissive attitude only amplified my isolation, making me feel as though I was battling this unseen force alone, desperately trying to protect our family from a threat only I could perceive. My behavior grew increasingly erratic. I found myself obsessively cleaning, not out of tidiness, but out of a desperate, superstitious need to cleanse our space of any lingering, unseen presences. I'd open windows, even in the cold, convinced fresh air might somehow dispel whatever lingered. I started searching Lily's room when she was out, looking for anything, any clue. Under her bed, in her closet, behind her dresser, an almost frantic search for what I wasn't even sure of. A hidden camera, a listening device. It was absurd, I knew, but the anxiety was a knot in my stomach that tightened with every passing hour. I even Googled invisible friends knowing secrets, only to be met with forums filled with similar, unsettling stories, many of which offered no comforting explanations, only more chilling accounts of things that went bump in the night and knew too much. The internet, a place I once sought solace, now only amplified my dread, confirming that I was not alone in this terrifying experience. One particular afternoon, the fear escalated to a point I could no longer ignore. I was in the kitchen, making lunch, when Lily came up to me, her eyes wide. "Tilly says you broke your special blue vase when you were little," she said, her voice a hushed whisper. "And you hid the pieces under the big tree in the backyard so Grandma wouldn't find out." My hand, holding a knife, froze midair. The blue vase, it was a ceramic bird, a gift from my grandmother, and I had accidentally knocked it off a shelf when I was about 6. Terrified of her anger, I'd gathered the shattered pieces in a cloth and buried them under the massive oak tree at the back of our childhood yard, miles from where we lived now. A secret I had never breathed to a soul, a memory so deeply buried I hadn't thought of it in decades. How could Lily know this? How could Tilly know this? It was impossible. My mind reeled, trying to grasp at any rational explanation, but there was none. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. I dropped the knife, the clatter echoing in the sudden silence of the kitchen. I knelt, gripping Lily's shoulders, my voice barely a whisper. "Lily, where did Tilly tell you this?" I pleaded, looking into her innocent, uncomprehending eyes. "She just told me, Mommy," Lily replied, completely unfazed. "She knew it from when you were a little girl." The purity of her answer, the absolute lack of guile, was more terrifying than any sinister whisper. This wasn't Lily making things up. This was information being fed to her. And the source was something utterly inexplicable, something that seemed to have access to the deepest, most forgotten corners of my past. It was like living in a haunted house where the ghost wasn't content with rattling chains, but was systematically dismantling my sanity with personal, intimate knowledge. The invisible friend had become a direct conduit to my deepest memories, and it was using my daughter as its unwitting mouthpiece. I started to withdraw. I stopped inviting friends over, convinced that Tilly would reveal some embarrassing secret about them too. I became hypervigilant, constantly scanning the environment, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything, that would betray the entity's presence. I began to sense a cold spot in the house, often in Lily's room or in the hallway just outside. It wasn't a draft. It was a distinct, localized drop in temperature, like walking into an invisible patch of refrigerated air. This feeling would often coincide with Lily talking to Tilly. I'd walk past her door and feel the chill, then hear her little voice, sometimes giggling, sometimes serious, conversing with thin air. The air would grow heavy, almost electric, and the hairs on my arms would stand on end. It was no longer just about unsettling information. It was about a physical manifestation, however subtle, that confirmed my deepest fears. The sheer audacity of this entity, its invasion of our most private spaces and thoughts, was maddening. One night I woke up to a sound coming from Lily's room. It wasn't a cry or a whimper, but a low, rhythmic whispering. My heart leaped into my throat. I crept to her door, pushing it open just a crack. Lily was sitting up in bed, facing the empty space in front of her, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her nightlight. She was talking, but it wasn't her usual chatter. Her voice was too serious, too calm for a 5-year-old. And then I heard another sound, faint, barely audible beneath Lily's words, a soft, almost imperceptible rustling, like dry leaves skittering across a floor or silk against silk. It was too regular to be Lily moving. It was a response. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a one-sided conversation anymore. This was a dialogue. I stood there, frozen, listening to my daughter conversing with nothing, yet something was undeniably there. A profound sense of terror washed over me, a feeling that I was not just witnessing something supernatural, but something deeply wrong. The whispers continued, Lily asking a question, then the faint rustling, then Lily responding. It was the sound of a secret shared, a pact made. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence, the intimacy, was sickening. I felt a terrible premonition, a chilling certainty that Lily was not just playing with an imaginary friend. She was being drawn into something dark, something that had found a way to bridge the gap between our world and whatever realm it inhabited. My daughter was in danger, and I had no idea how to fight an enemy I couldn't see. An entity that could pluck my most hidden memories as easily as a child picks daisies. The terror of the invisible friend that knows things had transcended mere spooky anecdotes and become a tangible, terrifying threat to my child's innocence and my own sanity. I knew then that I had to confront it, whatever it was, before it completely consumed us. The whispering incident was the breaking point. The faint rustling sound, the undeniable sense of a presence interacting with my child, propelled me from passive fear into a desperate, furious resolve. I couldn't stand by and watch my daughter be drawn into something sinister by an invisible friend that had proven it knows things far beyond any normal comprehension. My paranoia had hardened into conviction. Tilly was not benign. It was an entity, a predatory whisper in the dark, and it had infested our home. I knew I couldn't fight what I couldn't see, but I could confront it. I could make it known that I was aware of its presence and that I would not surrender my child to it. The next morning, I confronted Lily. I sat her down at the kitchen table, a glass of milk in front of her, and looked her straight in the eyes. "Lily," I began, my voice as firm as I could make it, "Tilly needs to go. She's not welcome here anymore." Lily's face crumpled. "But Mommy, Tilly's my friend," she protested, tears welling up. "She just tells me things." My heart ached at her distress, but I couldn't back down. "I know, sweetie, but some of the things Tilly tells you, they're not good secrets. They're my secrets, and they make me very, very sad." I tried to explain, tried to convey the gravity of the situation without terrifying her completely. She didn't understand, of course. How could she? To her, Tilly was a companion, a source of fascinating new information. But I had to make her understand, or at least make her choose. Lily became withdrawn. She'd sit in her room quietly, no longer chattering openly with Tilly, but I could still feel it, the low hum of its presence, the cold spot that would linger around her door. I knew it hadn't left. It was just biding its time, observing. The oppressive silence in the house was worse than the whispers. It was a silence filled with unspoken threats, with unseen eyes. I tried to research, to find any lore, any stories of entities like Tilly, but nothing quite fit. It wasn't a ghost in the traditional sense, not a poltergeist. It was something far more insidious, a parasitic presence that fed on intimacy and vulnerability. One afternoon, I was folding laundry in the living room, trying to project an air of calm normalcy I didn't feel. Lily was building a tower of blocks near me, unusually quiet. Then she paused, looking at an empty space near the window. Her eyes were wide, and a slow, unsettling smile spread across her face. "Tilly says Daddy lost his lucky watch down the drain last summer," she announced, her voice a little too bright, a little too knowing. My blood ran cold. Mark's watch. He had indeed lost it, a cheap but sentimental watch he'd received from his grandfather. He'd told me it must have fallen out of his pocket while gardening, but I'd always suspected it went down the drain in the bathroom sink, that he'd just been too embarrassed to admit he was careless. He'd never told me that. This was a secret he'd kept from me. That was it. That was the line. It wasn't just my memories anymore. It was pulling secrets from Mark, secrets he kept even from his wife. This entity wasn't just watching me, it was watching us. It was intentionally sowing discord, revealing vulnerabilities, eroding the trust within our family. I stood up, my heart a furious drum against my ribs. "Tilly," I yelled, my voice cracking, echoing in the sudden, piercing silence of the room. Lily flinched, startled by my outburst. "I know you're here. I know you're listening," I shouted, addressing the empty air, the pervasive chill I felt. I swept my gaze across the room, desperate to find some focal point, some visual to anchor my rage. "You will leave this house. You will leave my daughter alone." A low, guttural growl, impossibly faint but undeniably present, reverberated through the room. It wasn't a human sound, and it wasn't the rustling I'd heard before. It was deeper, more primal, a sound of ancient displeasure. Lily started to cry, a frightened whimper. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with an almost suffocating pressure. The cold spots intensified, swirling around us, making my breath mist in the warm afternoon. The blocks Lily had been playing with began to slide, slowly at first, then rapidly, clattering to the floor as if kicked by an unseen foot. A framed photo on the mantelpiece, one of Mark and me on our wedding day, tilted precariously, then crashed to the floor, the glass shattering. "Leave us alone," I screamed, pulling Lily into my arms, shielding her with my body. I could feel an intense, palpable shift in the air, a malevolent presence pressing down on us, an invisible weight. It felt as though hundreds of unseen eyes were suddenly fixed on me, on my defiance. Then a voice, not through Lily, but directly into my mind. A cold, dry whisper that felt like sand grating against ancient stone. "She is mine now," she reveals. I listen. I know, I always know. The words were not spoken aloud, but they pierced my thoughts with horrifying clarity, accompanied by an image, fleeting but vivid, of a gaunt, impossibly tall figure, its face obscured by shadow, its fingers long and skeletal, reaching for Lily. It was the face of the thing that knows things, the fear archives of our lives. I squeezed my eyes shut, holding Lily tighter. "No," I roared, my voice raw. "She is not yours. You will never have her." I don't know where the strength came from, but a surge of pure, primal maternal protectiveness washed over me, overriding the terror. I grabbed Lily's hand and ran, throwing open the front door and pulling her outside into the bright, blessed sunlight. We didn't stop running until we reached Mark's car, abandoning the house, the invisible entity and every secret it held. We never went back, not really. Mark, bewildered but unnerved by my frantic state and the broken photo, agreed to stay with my parents for a while. He tried to get me to explain, but how could I? How could I tell him about the voice in my head, the image of the skeletal thing, the secrets that had been weaponized? He sees my fear, though. He sees the way I jump at every sound, the way I hold Lily a little too tightly. He sees the subtle changes in Lily, too. She rarely mentions Tilly anymore, but there's a haunted look in her eyes sometimes, a quietness that wasn't there before. The house still stands, silent and empty, an ominous shadow at the end of our street. We tried to sell it, but every potential buyer found some inexplicable fault, a chill that lingered deeper than any draft. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it's still there in the silence of our old home, the entity that gleaned our deepest secrets, that spoke to my child. I wonder if it learned enough, if it's still listening, still knowing. And sometimes, when Lily is asleep, I find myself compulsively checking the locks, listening to the creaks of our new, supposedly safe home, my heart pounding with the chilling certainty that the invisible friend that knows too much might not be confined to a single house. It might just be waiting, listening for new whispers, new secrets in the quiet corners of our fractured lives. The thought is a constant, suffocating blanket of dread, a promise that the terror isn't over. It's been months now, but the air around me still feels thin, stretched. Every quiet moment, every shadow holds a memory of that suffocating presence. I can't shake the feeling of being watched, an invisible tether connecting me to that house, to that entity. Sleep offers little respite. The dreams are vivid, fragmented images of long, skeletal fingers reaching, of a voice that whispers forgotten truths directly into my mind. I see Lily's innocent face, then the sinister smile she wore when she spoke for Tilly, and a cold wave of nausea washes over me. Mark tries to be understanding, but I see the worry in his eyes, the way he sometimes looks at me as though I'm a stranger. He thinks I'm traumatized, that I imagined most of it, a breakdown from stress. But I know what happened. I know the truth that chills me to the bone. There are things in this world that defy explanation, things that feed on human connection and vulnerability, that pry open the deepest chambers of our past. I sometimes catch Lily staring into empty spaces, a far-off look in her eyes, and I wonder what she sees, what she remembers. Does she still hear the whispers? Is the invisible friend truly gone, or has it merely retreated, waiting for the right moment to claim her once more? I hug her tighter, check the locks again, but the dread is a constant companion, a ghost that follows me everywhere. The silence of the night no longer brings peace, only the anxious anticipation of what might be listening, what might be knowing, just beyond the edge of what I can see. I feel as though a piece of my soul has been permanently etched by that horror, a constant vigilance against the unseen. And I know deep down that some secrets, once unearthed, can never be buried again. They linger